By the time autumn arrived in Lake Harmony, Minnesota, the bench by the lake had become more than a place. It had become a quiet promise. The leaves turned slowly at first, green giving way to soft gold, amber, and deep red. The air grew cooler in the mornings, and the lake carried a silver stillness that made every sunrise feel sacred. And yet, despite the changing season, one thing remained steady. Every morning, someone still came to the bench. Sometimes it was Lucy, now convinced that collecting fallen leaves was serious scientific work. Sometimes it was Sarah, looking less tired than she had in the summer, though still carrying the kind of strength that comes from surviving hard things. Sometimes it was Mason, pretending he was only there because the path happened to be on the way. Sometimes it was Melissa, when she visited from Chicago, bringing coffee and pretending not to cry whenever she saw her mother laughing again. And always, in one way or another, it was Eleanor. She still came first. She still sat with her coffee. She still touched the faded carved initials in the wood, W+E. But now, when she touched them, she no longer felt only loss. She felt gratitude, the kind that arrives quietly, the kind that doesn't erase pain, but teaches it how to sit beside joy. One crisp October morning, Eleanor arrived at the bench carrying her usual basket. Inside were pumpkin muffins, still warm. Lucy spotted them from halfway down the path and shouted, "She brought the good ones!" Sarah groaned. "Lucy, we talked about indoor voice." "We're outside," Lucy replied instantly. Eleanor laughed. Mason, already sitting at the far edge of the bench with his hood up, tried to hide a smile and failed. Noah clapped wildly from the stroller, as if he too understood the importance of pumpkin muffins. For a while, it was just another perfect, ordinary morning. Lucy arranged bright red leaves on the bench and declared them nature decorations. Mason pretended not to listen, but quietly handed her the best-looking yellow leaf when he thought no one noticed. Sarah sipped her coffee with both hands and watched her children with the soft exhaustion of a mother who is finally beginning to breathe again. And Eleanor sat in the middle of it all, looking at the people around her, feeling something that once seemed impossible, belonging. Then Sarah's phone rang. She looked at the screen and froze. For just a second, but Eleanor noticed. "Everything okay?" Eleanor asked gently. Sarah swallowed. "It's him." Lucy immediately looked up. "Dad?" Sarah hesitated, then nodded. She stepped a few feet away to answer, her voice low. The rest of them remained still. Even Lucy, sensing something serious, sat quietly with her leaf collection in her lap. Mason glanced at Eleanor, then back at the lake. Noah kicked his feet, unaware of the tension gathering in the air. When Sarah returned a few minutes later, her face had changed. Not shattered, not panicked, just unsettled. Lucy looked up at her mother with wide eyes. Sarah crouched down in front of her. "Your dad wants to visit this weekend," she said carefully. Lucy blinked. Then, to everyone's surprise, she asked the question softly. "Are you sad?" Sarah's breath caught. Children, Eleanor had learned, always reach the truth faster than adults. "A little," Sarah admitted, "and nervous." Lucy thought about this. Then she nodded once. "That's okay," she said softly. "You can still come to the bench after." Sarah laughed through tears. "Thank you, baby." And Eleanor, watching that small exchange, felt her chest tighten with a kind of ache that was almost beautiful. Because healing does not mean life stops being complicated. It just means you no longer face the complications alone. Later that week, the weather turned colder. A sharp wind swept across the lake, carrying dry leaves over the path in little spinning circles. Eleanor arrived wrapped in her thick wool coat and was surprised to find Mason already there. No hood this time, just a knit cap and red hands shoved deep into his pockets. "You're early," she said. He shrugged. Couldn't sleep. Eleanor sat beside him. For a while, they watched the lake in silence. Then Mason spoke. "My mom wants to move." Eleanor turned slightly. "Out of town?" He nodded. "About an hour away. Smaller place, cheaper rent." He kicked at the dirt near the bench. "She says it's better. Fresh start or whatever." "And what do you think?" He laughed bitterly. "I think fresh start is what adults say when they're wrecking everything and trying to make it sound inspirational." Eleanor smiled despite herself. "That's not entirely unfair." Mason looked out at the water, jaw tight. "This is the only place that feels normal." Eleanor understood what he meant. Not normal in the usual sense, normal as in a place where your heart can unclench for a minute. She reached into her basket and handed him a muffin. He took it without comment. After a long silence, she said, "Sometimes we don't get to keep the place that helped us heal." He frowned. "Then what's the point?" "The point," Eleanor said gently, "is that the healing comes with you." Mason stared at Eleanor. She continued, "This bench matters, but it's not magic wood. It's what happened here, what you felt here, what you learned here." He looked down at the muffin in his hand. "And what did I learn?" Eleanor smiled softly. "That even boys in hoodies who look allergic to feelings can still show up." That earned a short laugh. Then, after a pause, Mason asked quietly, "What if I leave and everything gets bad again?" Eleanor looked at the lake, where the cold wind ruffled the surface into tiny silver waves. "Then you remember," she said, "that you've already survived bad once, and this time you'll know you can do it." Mason didn't answer, but before he left, he said something he had never said before. "Thanks, Eleanor." And somehow, from him, those two words felt like a whole speech. That Saturday, Melissa came again. This time, she brought a small cardboard box. They sat in Eleanor's kitchen while tea steeped, and the house filled with the smell of cinnamon. "What's that?" Eleanor asked. Melissa pushed the box toward her. "Open it." Inside was a framed photograph, old, slightly faded. Eleanor gasped softly. It was her and Walter, not young newlyweds, but not old either, maybe in their 40s, standing by the lake, standing by the bench. Walter had one arm around her shoulders. Eleanor was laughing at something he'd just said. Behind them, the water shimmered exactly the way it still did in the mornings. "Where did you find this?" she whispered. "In Dad's old study box, the one we never finished going through." Eleanor touched the frame with trembling fingers. For a moment, the room disappeared. She was back there, back in that version of the world where Walter was still warm and real and right beside her. Tears filled her eyes. Melissa reached across the table. "I thought maybe it belongs near the bench." Eleanor looked up. Melissa smiled through her own tears. "Not outside, obviously, it'll get ruined, but maybe in the house, somewhere you can see it before you leave each morning." Eleanor couldn't speak. She simply nodded. That evening they hung the photo in the hallway by the front door, so that every morning before Eleanor walked to the lake, she would see Walter smiling back at her, not as a ghost, not as a wound, as a companion to the life still unfolding. A few days later, Lucy came running down the path, carrying construction paper, markers, and the kind of determination usually reserved for tiny generals. "I have a project," she announced. Sarah, following behind with Noah bundled in a blanket, sighed. "You'll see." Lucy spread the supplies across the bench. "We're making a sign." Mason, who had shown up 5 minutes earlier, raised an eyebrow. "A sign for what?" Lucy looked offended that this was not obvious. "For the bench." Eleanor smiled. "What kind of sign?" Lucy began writing in large, uneven letters. Mason leaned over. "That says kindness." "I'm not done," Lucy snapped. With unexpected seriousness, Sarah said, "Actually, maybe she's on to something." Eleanor tilted her head. Sarah looked around at the bench, the lake, the people who kept returning. "This place, it matters." Mason scoffed lightly. "It's a bench." Sarah looked at him. "You keep coming." He looked away. "That proves nothing." But even he smiled. Noah